Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's demo, Exploring DevOps Features. I'm Rachel Chisholm, Marketing Manager here at Armor and host for today's broadcast. Before we get started, I'd like to go over some webinar housekeeping tips. Everyone is currently on mute and will remain so throughout the broadcast. Please use the chat window to inform us of any audio or technical issues. If you do have sound issues, we recommend calling in via phone instead of audio through your computer. Use the question panel to ask about any of the topics being discussed. We will answer questions throughout the session and at the end. Today's demo is being recorded and a link will be sent to all attendees post-event. With us today, we have Robert Rea, Vice President of Engineering at Armor. With over 17 years of experience, Robert oversees our engineering strategy, providing architectural guidance and development of Armor's security and compliance platform. Thanks so much for joining us today, Robert. And at this time, I'll pass it over to you so we can dive into our technical showcase.
Thanks. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for spending some of your Friday with me. Really excited to dive into a lot of the great capabilities that we have with this latest launch. I did want to recap a few of those. And so then as we dive into this, we'll touch on them, go through some of these examples, and really kind of talk about with DevOps and how you can leverage infrastructure as code and being able to define environments across multiple clouds through code. Really, how can you leverage that to start to tie security into that as well? So a lot of the latest features we have allow you to bake in security as code as well, which is really one of the major pieces that we'll kind of highlight and talk about today, which is really exciting. So thanks for spending your time with me. With the latest release, we've got a lot of new capabilities. So one of those being intrusion prevention, and we'll talk through how you can turn that on and off. Policy recommendation scans. We'll go through a great example of this is how we can fine tune and have sophisticated policies customized to your workloads, which is essential as you get into the DevOps world of managing multiple workloads across possibly thousands of VMs. We'll go into some vulnerability exclusions. We'll probably skip that part since it doesn't tie as much into some of the DevOps capabilities. And then really when we look at log and data management, we launched a lot more log sources. We've got a lot of Kibana visualization and log search screens that you can leverage. And we've had other webinars we've done across those as well, so you can see our documentation or watch some of those to get more information. Today, what we'll really be focusing on are four of these areas that I think tie heavily into the DevOps world and how you can implement security through these tools, which is one, leveraging our security incident connector. We'll kind of talk about at the end. But really that's being able to leverage our platform so that you can get our detections and incidents and events into a system of your choice. You can integrate with this if you're going to leverage a ticketing system or another logging system to help guide managing security incidents. And then really the highlight of what we'll talk about today is this operational control and flexibility through the CLI, through Toolbox, and through asset tagging. So we'll jump into some really specific examples of that, and then be able to jump into some of your questions as well. So first thing I wanted to do was really, I think it's important to understand when we go into this, making sure everybody, if you have questions after the fact or want to come do any research on it, we do have on our docs.armor.com, you can come in and see some of these specifics, whether you're currently an Armor customer or interested in learning more about these features, you can do that from our website or from docs.armor. What I'm going to jump to now is really how you get into some of the installation components of it. So that's really, I think, where a lot of the DevOps and security pieces start is when you get into installing our software, installing security sensors, how do you make that so you can do it, with Terraform, with ARM templates, with CloudFormation templates, user data in the AWS world. So a lot of that, what we've done is try to make it as simple as possible for our customers. Let me jump to a Linux example. So it's really just a one-liner. That one-liner you can run, and you have two really options of that. One is to basically install our agent, and then our agent acts as an orchestrator, which can then take in any CLI commands, which we'll dive into some examples today, to be able to customize to your environment. So we'll go through that for you as well. And then another option is really this full option, which will run through a host of all of our security sensors, from installing our intrusion prevention module, antivirus, file integrity monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and then logging. And all of that is wired up into our SIEM and our data lake as well to provide you with security outcomes. And so what we do is when we go through this process, what's neat around it is that one-liner will do a lot of extra commands for you to set it up, as well as being able to leverage some of the capabilities that we've just deployed. So for example, that one-liner will do things such as install trend and turning on file integrity monitoring with recommendation scans. So we'll go through and see some of these examples, but that's really the main piece of it that starts to get into the options that you have out of the gate. So that first option being, do I want to install the Armor agent by itself and give it the very specific commands I want? Or do I want out of the gates, maybe I'm just getting started, I really want the best and recommended protections that Armor has, and from there I'll fine tune it. That would be that full option, which installs all of our security sensors and then allows you to fine tune it from there. The other capabilities it gives you is the option to not install certain things. So if you maybe don't want to turn AV on, you don't have to, or you can turn it on from that full install and then turn it off. So we'll go through some of those examples as well. But did want to show you where this documentation resided. So if you were trying to make that decision out of the gates of, do I install and kind of provision it more myself, or do I go the full route and let it install for me all of the security sensors? And I think the main use case there is really going to depend on what your workload is. So for example, let's say you've got a workload that you've got an auto scaling group within AWS. In that group, you know that this machine is one of your web servers, and it's kind of that golden template that you've got. So one of the ways you could run it is install our software on that AMI, and it will do a recommendation scan, so determine what software is installed on that VM, and be able to apply the best file integrity monitoring rules and intrusion prevention rules for you. And then in that case, you could fine tune it to, we'll go through an example, maybe turn on cross-site scripting rules as well, since it is a web server. From that, you have the option to really define or decide, do I want to go through that every time I spin up a new VM, or do I want to go and set that off to the side? So I think those are where you'll start to get in those decisions, depending on how much control you want over your environment that you're very sensitive to, such as your database server. You may want to handle a little bit differently than your web servers that are in an auto scaling group. So let's jump now to a few more examples. Let's go here. So I've got a machine I spun up. I installed the agent and turned on a few pieces of software, but I wanted to highlight a couple things as we go through it. So the first thing I want to run is we do have, let me show you this actually. So first thing I really want to run through is obviously help. So the first thing is, what are the capabilities I have when we get into the CLI, and really why did we put this in the CLI versus the UI? And so we can get into some of the UI components that we have within our portal that you can actually manage this through as well. We'll do that at the end. But really, when you look at why we put it into the command line, it is that infrastructure as code capabilities. It is that security as code capabilities, because it gives you that option to have all these lines to turn on your security sensors, to apply recommendation rules, to be able to turn on IPS rules specifically, check those into your source control system and have those deploy out so that you've got your full tracking of what security rules you've got on and how that's actually running in your environment. So that's one of the key capabilities we wanted there, as well as if you've got other systems to manage your host, you can do it while you're actually on the machine looking at it and working on it. For policy management, for monitoring as well. So we'll see how you can, check the state of some of these things. So for example, what we will do is do a trend status. Now, what this will do is this is going to give me all of the information related to the trend security features that we have within our product, which is antivirus, file integrity monitoring, and intrusion prevention. When I do this, I'm going to get back this big blob of JSON, which may not mean a lot to most people. So I do have a JQ example, which will clean it up for us. The reason we bring it back in a JSON format like that is it really allows you to do to inspect that JSON and be able to build additional scripting rules you may want on top of it. So one of the biggest design decisions we had with the new agent to be able to make it DevOps friendly was to make sure we were bringing as much information to you on the NVM as possible, so you can make those decisions either live time, like we're typing here, or through scripts that you have that may be running from, provisioning massive environments across multiple clouds. So that's one of the main reasons we did that. And here you can see I've leveraged JQ to do a couple things. One was really to go in and see and inspect what's the state of these different security sensors on this box. So I can see here I've got file integrity monitoring. Right now it's off. Antivirus is inactive. I've turned off as well, but it is installed. And then IPS, you can see that I've got that in detect mode with auto apply recommendations enabled. I think what I wanted to do is make sure, when I talk about those security features, you're like, well, what do those even mean? Maybe you're not familiar with intrusion prevention and what do I get from that? So jumping back to the help, if you're interested in those pieces, if you jump into Armor Toolbox 3.0, and then you can pick that security service you're interested in learning more about, such as intrusion prevention. And that will give you that brief summary of what does it do for you? What is the security value that this brings for you, such as detecting or preventing zero-day vulnerabilities, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, being able to turn it between that detect mode and that prevent mode. And then once you have that knowledge set of how that security sensor can work for you, what are the options that we've given you from the CLI to be able to put it in those different modes, to be able to actually turn it off? And then what are the assigned rules, and then being able to assign and unassign rules, which is really one of the biggest capabilities that we've brought, is to be able to manage that at that level, which is nice. I'll jump into these real quick to talk through what does it mean to auto apply recommendations, or what's a recommendation scan? Because we talked about at the beginning of it's one of the new features we brought. What does that mean? What it means is it gives you, we'll leverage Trend to inspect the operating system, if it's Windows, the Windows registry, installed software, services that are installed on the VM, ports that are open, and then even users that are enabled on the VM. And it will, at that point, be able to recommend file integrity monitoring rules and intrusion prevention or detection rules based on that installed software. So it really fine tunes and makes a sophisticated policy per that workload. And also we have it so that you can have it run every 7 days. So that as we have new detections out there, new signatures, new vulnerabilities, those are all able to be adjusted and added to that VM. So you've got that auto tuning security policy, as well as you're installing software. You could have a VM that maybe starts out doesn't have something like Nginx or Squid or IIS installed on it, but then you go and enable that or install that software. Well, now you have a rule that will help block or detect traffic based on that new software you installed. And what this does is this allows you to determine, do you want, when a recommendation scan is run, to auto apply those rules, or really just have that list of, here's the ones we recommend that you turn on, but you want to go and assign them yourself. And that may tie into your change management processes, or maybe, again, your database server where you're more sensitive. You may just want to evaluate what those recommendation rules were and then turn those on. So that's why we've given you those options. Let's jump back to our VM now. And so you can see here for intrusion prevention, I've got that in detect mode, and then that auto apply recommendation is enabled. So that means I ran this command here, IPS detect auto apply recommendations on. Let's assume that this workload I'm a little more sensitive to, have a conversation with the developers or engineers, and like, oh, no, I don't want you to do that. Let's turn that off. So if we want to make that turned off, we grab that command. We can switch it. So the one I ran to turn it on was just auto apply recommendations equals on. Now we can go ahead and just switch it to off. What that will do is immediately contacts Armor. We're able to communicate with the console and sends back, again, this JSON payload, which is that policy that actually changed it. And if I go back and look at what's the state of it now, after that heartbeat, you can see that auto apply recommendations is now disabled. So in just a few seconds, I'm able to quickly fine tune my policy, change the policy. I could check that one line into source control if it was making sure that all new deployments of this VM don't have that in that mode, and then able to confirm that that change actually took place. Same thing can take place if we want to turn it into detect mode. So if I have, or sorry, turn it into prevent mode. So right now it's in detect mode. We can switch it into prevent mode, meaning it will actually now block that traffic, those packets that match those signatures. And we can go and inspect what that change was. And see now we're in prevent mode. Key capability of that I wanted to highlight is really that gives you the option of being able to start in prevent mode or in detect mode and see what rules are firing and not firing, and then move that into prevent mode to block traffic. Also wanted to show how easy it was to switch those, so that if you're in prevent mode and all of a sudden it's blocking good traffic and causing an application issue, that you can come quickly switch it to detect mode and then understand, what change that took place on that VM that was causing that. One thing to note is the recommendation rules. They do also have a intelligence to them to understand if you're in prevent mode and this rule is a little more sensitive or noisy, it won't turn it into block mode initially. So it won't be in prevent mode. It'll just stay in detect mode if it's one of those that can be a little bit more widespread. So that's nice too. So you don't have to have as much concern of being in prevent mode with auto apply recommendations on. Let's jump to, let me pause and make sure there's no questions as we talk through the trend capabilities. Okay. One other thing I wanted to jump through. Let's kind of talk about how we now fine tune it. So that's how you can turn on and off those major modules of, I can install trend, or from here, actually, I can install logging. So if I look at this machine, I only installed trend to start, so we can go and install logging. So we do a logging install. What that will do is install FileBeat on the machine and then bring up all of the operating system logs into our data lake and into our SIM for a correlation. Again, that's that high level module capabilities you have of which security sensors do I want installed or not. And then we showed how you could turn those on and off, like from prevent mode or from detect mode. Next, we're going to jump into, now let's fine tune IPS a little further and get into some of the specifics. So you can see our logging was now installed. If I do a FileBeat, you'll see that that's now running on the VM. So let's look at what our IPS options are. I'm going to run one command here that's going to take it a minute just to show you. Actually, let's do this one. Okay. So this one's going to show me what are my IPS rules that I've currently assigned. So before we started this demo, I came in, I assigned, I think, 12 different rules. And here what I've done is at the end, kind of trim some of that output and then make it pretty so we can look in and see in a little bit of detail what we've turned on. I did turn those off, sorry. That's good, okay. Let me undo this thing. Let me grab my full set. Okay. So this next one, I'm gonna run. This one will take a minute. And I'll bring up this full list while that runs because it does take a second because it is such a massive payload. Is our full IDS list. So what it's doing, and I'll show you in a second what it outputs, but what we output to you at the actual VM level is the ability to see all of your options for the IPS rules that you can assign. And that one I filtered it to just things that had cross-site script or cross in them, so I could look for cross-site scripting ones. But you can see here, there's hundreds, if not thousands. I think there's over 1,000 different rules you can pick from to be able to choose and find ones that work for your scenario. Again, that's, I think, the power of recommendation scans, is that they filter this down to one, the operating system and then installed software, then those that actually suit that actual workload that you're working with. But they do output in this way, this full list of available rules to you. And in here, what I've done is leverage JQ to really filter that set out to just, what are the ones? Let me go quickly show you. That contain cross-site scripting in them. So you can see in here, I can look and see what are all the different ones I might want to go and apply. And then to apply those, I just grab that ID out of it and do an assign rule with that ID in it. So you look and see here, this is a Linux machine. Maybe I want to assign this rule, which is ID 600. So I'll copy that one and come down to IPS assign rules. You can do a comma separated list if you have multiple rules you want to assign, and then we'll do 600. And then we'll see that that one's now been assigned. You can see that here. When I ran that other rule, you can see that I ran a recommendation scan. And then you can see here that there's the recommended IDs that it has that I should go assign. So this is one of those states of, you know, go back up and show you guys. Because I have auto apply recommendations set to false, but I did run a recommendation scan, it's telling me that based on the installed software on this box, which is, there's not a whole lot on here, it's just a basic Amazon Linux machine. Here's the rules that it says I should apply. So this gives me that option of, okay, well, maybe I'll grab that list and just go assign it. It also identified and said, hey, you don't need this rule 600. Why? Because I don't have Apache even running on the box. So it's got that intelligence and it's showing me right away. I just assigned it and it's saying, hey, you probably don't need this rule. I don't see Apache. Now, if I go and install it, it would change what it recommends there. And then also shows me that I did actually go and have 600 assigned to it, which is really neat. That is where these things start to bring together that intelligence. What's neat about that is, let's grab this list now and put those on. So you can see here now we've assigned those rules. I leverage the recommendation scan to be able to quickly identify a good set of rules for me. You can see there that it doesn't have any more that it recommends that I apply, but it does have the ones I take off. If I go back and list my rules here. You'll see here I didn't JQ yet, but these are all the ones I just assigned. So if we go out, make it pretty for everybody. You can see these are the ones that it recommended that I have on this box. So OpenSSL, Cypher Suite SSL v3, SMTP decoding. So again, gives you that full details of what were the ones that it recommended. I can now research and understand, okay, here's the ones it recommended. That makes sense, or I understand that. Or maybe I don't want that one, I can take it off. But it does give you that full list. The other neat piece of that, which is nice, is if you are, again, going back to DevOps and I want my security coded into the provisioning of this VM, I can run this command right after I register Armor, right after I install Trend. I can have it assign these rules and then turn into prevent or detect mode. So that way this is all completely tracked by code of which ones I should have, which rules I should have assigned, which is, again, that really ties back to why did we put this command line? That was that key capability there. All right, let me jump past IPS now because we are going along on time, but I did want to walk through that full cycle of how you can leverage CLI to understand what can you turn on and off, how can you leverage recommendation scans, how can you go and see what you've actually now applied, and then being able to take all of that information, drop it into a single line of code in your source control, and now you have really turned your security tied into your DevOps framework and pipelines. All right, let's now jump into Ampush. I'll have to log in for. Oops. I think I mistyped that if I did. Hold on one second. I knew I'd get booted out. All right, let me MFA. 1 second. All right. Make sure there's no questions. Okay. All right. Let's jump now to my test account that we're using, which is Tuesday. Infrastructure. So I talked about the CLI, how you can do all of that. You know, if you're actually on the VM, or actually how you can turn it into code and do it when you're provisioning. What if you don't want to do that? What if you just want to do it from something else, or you've already provisioned a bunch of VMs and now you need to make changes after the fact? You don't want to go log into 100 or 1,000 or 2,000 VMs. What we've done is we've brought all of those capabilities into the portal itself. So leveraging something called Toolbox, which is from the infrastructure left nav down into Toolbox, really let you go and schedule those commands on any VM for that account. So I can see in here, here's my list of tasks that I've already run against my VMs. If I want to go and schedule a new one, that same list we saw in help, from agent commands to antivirus, file integrity monitoring. You can see here, we've been doing a lot with intrusion prevention today. Those same operations I had of turning into prevent and detect mode, or assigning and unassigning rules, I can do straight from here. So, taking that example we just did, I could say, let's do unassigned IPS rule. I think it didn't want me to have 600 anymore. I can do that, put that value in there, which is the same of what you're putting in the command line. And here you can name it. So in this, I might have a CMR, which I already did 225, which is really, so I can unassign my rule. We can select a future date. So if you have a window you want this to run in, it will run in that 15-minute window. And then you can go and select your VM associated to this. So this is my 153 machine. And then we can schedule that out. If you have 1,000 VMs, you could go run this across 1,000 VMs if all of them had 600 on it. Or you could do things like run a recommendation scan across your entire environment that way as well. So you can see in here, we've got the name we put in it, when we created it, that it's scheduled for right now, what's the operation it's going to perform, the virtual machine, and then what status is it, it's in pending. What that does is the Armor agent itself, which we talked about at the very beginning, there was this orchestrator of all of these commands, is really at running these checks to see, hey, do I need to go and perform this operation? That's what it's going to do now. You can see here the operation it's performing is unassign a rule. You can see we took 600 now out of the list. And then you can also see that there's no longer the details where it's saying, hey, you need to take 600 off. It's not important anymore. This information here, you can see I didn't run an unassigned, it just picked it up. But it ran as though I had typed it in. So that same experience that you're used to is the same whether you're using our UI or whether you're using the command line. If we come back over to here and refresh this, you'll see that it's not completed. And then we can click on this and get the full details of what just occurred. So you can see in here what was the product, intrusion prevention, what was our operation, which was to unassign an IPS rule. That value was 600, and then the full details of what occurred on the VM. So that same output that you see there, we've also stored in our UI for auditing and for you also to view. And you can see when it executed and the duration, and the result code as well. All of that's important from being able to audit and track it, as well as the result codes coming out if you're on the CLI or you're in the UI, because we do have some customers and partners that have leveraged that where they're automating a lot of scripts after the fact of turning different security features on and off. That's the biggest piece of the toolbox I wanted to cover, which is really that full capabilities, managing your entire fleet across multiple clouds, all in that single place for your security sensors. Let's jump now into, let's talk about asset tagging next. So asset tagging, go to my machine that we've been playing with, which is this one here, allows you to put tags on VMs, which may not seem like that big a deal of, like, well, I know I use tags at AWS or other environments, but what's important here is that it allows you to do a couple of things with it. It's not just that we have it on the VM, we've now wired that into other areas of the platform so that that data is now flowing through the stack. So I'll first show you how we can leverage tags, how you can put that in as a simple command line that you use when you install the software, or maybe have it in your infrastructure as code, and then where we see that now flow out of the system through those incident connectors. So let's jump back to our virtual machine. Let me clear the screen for all of us. Just show you what product we're going to work with. So this is the tags component of it. So we can do tags help. You can see here we've got these basic commands. I can create tags, delete tags, or describe tags. So I can see which ones I've currently got. Oops, I didn't spell it right. knew that would happen at some point when I'm typing. So you can see in here, that key is environment, that value is prod, same thing that matches here. And again, it is all tied through of I can add or remove them from the UI, or I can add or remove them from the CLI. That's important just again, as you're trying to make sure, or we're trying to make sure that philosophy of everything you can do in the UI, we really want to start at the CLI first, because we want to make sure that you can do everything from that security as code perspective as you're provisioning up an entire environment. If we want to add a new tag real quick, we can do that. And so we'll see we've got the second one that was added. We'll come back. Got our other one that was inserted. Come back to our virtual machines list. You can see then we've got our other tag there now. So where is this important, or why would you use this capability? For us, we've leveraged it for a couple of things. From Armor, we do it a lot in our compliance capabilities. So we'll use it to tag, is this a PCI related asset or not? Which environment is it in? Which cloud is it in? Which region is it in? We'll leverage it to understand which team is responsible for that asset. So it really helps identify a lot of those features. So as we're running our VTM program, how can we identify which servers are responsible for those teams? As well as, when we're doing, evidence gathering for PCI auditors, will show me what your PCI assets, let's do now our testing against those. So that's one way we've leveraged it. A lot of our partners have leveraged it to, and which we'll show here in a second, to be able to tag out that information with their specific data. So it could be, which cloud is this in? Again, you've got this single pane of glass, and you're bringing all these virtual machines together and all these different workloads and information. It's really valuable to understand where is that asset living. Again, which environment could it be for you? It could be your dev environment, so you may not be as concerned about how you would manage that versus having CMRs on any Toolbox tasks on your production environment, that sort of thing. We've also seen it used for partners that are having customer information flow through there in terms of this is their unique identifiers for that VM, or they're leveraging it to understand what downstream systems that would be important for. So let's talk about that next, which is that downstream system piece. So we've talked now about how do you install the software, how do you configure that, multiple ways you can do that through the UI or the command line, being able to actually fine tune your policies. How do you define now your environment through asset tags? Well, now let's say an incident occurs. So all of this, you're setting up these security sensors, these policies, because really Armor is there to be able to have that correlation to provide those detection and incidents to work through from our SOC or yours. So that piece where we've now, what's the next step of a detection or an incident has occurred? How do I tie that into my system? So we have in our help, we've got a webhook configuration that we can talk through. And this is a couple of things. We have tagging that, again, I just showed you from the VM, but that can be from our login data management platform as you're bringing in, your Cisco ASA logs or your CloudTrail logs. All those can have custom tags on them as well. As that's flowing through our platform, for webhooks, you can also configure that information to flow out to you as well. So if we go down into how to use this platform, I won't go into too much detail, but first you'll configure that transform. So as we have a detection, like a security incident, which let me show you what one of those looks like. Under security and incidents, I had one I ran today earlier, which was to just drop an ICAR file on this test VM. You can see here it was detected. It was an incident, low severity because it was just ICAR. It does show you the incidents that are associated to it. So you can see in here, here's the full details. I won't go into how you can research this in Kibana, but this full payload and all of this incident information, you can webhook out to your own platforms as well. So that's what I configured over here, which is just tying up to webhook.site of that same information. How would I get it to flow into another platform? You do that by first setting up your configuration transform. It's really just giving it a name. What's the format? What are the events you want? And then really, what are the tags that you want on that payload? And then the last piece is that notification API. So I'll just do this real quick because I know I don't want to go into too much detail. But the two examples I had for that was really, let's set up a full config to the webhook. All I did was add a default label, which was an environment of alpha. And then I renamed the tag environment that I have in my asset to a webhook key name. That's that dynamic tag. So it's going to pull it off all the assets. And then also show where you could grab this in Kibana. And then I just wired it up to this webhook site, ran those two, that configured it up. And then once I dropped that ICAR file, we now have that webhook information flowing out of the system. So you can see in here, you have the description, has the full details on incident ID, when this actually occurred, whether it's open or not. It shows which security or SIM rules that fired for it, gives it a severity. And then here's where you're seeing that information now flow through. So that prod that I tacked on that VM, when I dropped the ICAR file, that's flowing out through the entire system. I can custom and rename that for how my downstream systems are expecting that information, or I can have global values set in there as well. And then the full details of that payload that actually did that correlation and identified it, those are tagged with that custom information as well. So that asset tagging is really important. One, from the UI gives you information on what your environment looks like, how to manage it from your vulnerability compliance programs or your security programs, as well as how downstream systems leveraging webhooks could pick that up as well. So you can make further decisions on it. You may triage it and say, oh, this is my prod environment. That's a much higher severity. That goes to this team versus another one. So that was really that ties in that asset tagging and now the incident connectors. I know I jumped through that Postman stuff pretty quickly, but I didn't want to dive too much in this webinar with it. All right. So that really covers a lot of the DevOps capabilities. I did want to leave some time for questions since we did get pretty in-depth technically. I will jump over to kind of talk about our resources that are out there. Again, mentioned armor.com/resources. You can get our technical brief. We do have other webinars that we've done on these new features, as well as docs.armor.com. If you're trying to dive into some specific details, maybe you're already an Armor customer and you want to start picking up these capabilities of leveraging intrusion prevention, or starting to now tag your systems so that you can leverage some of the more VTM capabilities that we released as well. Those are all out there. So just making sure you have that information, and I will open it up for questions. Thank you all for listening.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Robert. Like Robert said, at this time, we'll move into the question and answer portion of the webinar. So please feel free to use the question panel to submit any of your questions if you haven't already done so. And while you're doing that, I want to ask all attendees to participate in the quick survey that we'll send out after the broadcast, where you can provide us with a little bit of feedback. Also, if you think about a question once the broadcast is closed, you can also submit those questions in that survey as you rate our webinar for the day. And if you'd like to attend any other upcoming events or webinars, we have them all listed at armor.com/events. And we do have one more technical demo as part of this series where we will go into more depth about exploring our log and data management capabilities. And we'll be hosting that in 2 weeks on Friday, July 24th. With that said, I know we have a few questions that have come in. Robert, the first one that I see, do we have to stick to any predetermined tags when using tagging, or can we create tags however we want?
No, you can create tags however you want. The only difference is you can't have spacing in there just for how it's managed that throughout the systems. There's a few special characters you can't leverage, but other than that, you can use any names you want. And within those, I think it's 50 character limit on the key and 50 character limit on the value.
Okay, perfect. And then I've got one that says, what kind of information can Armor send to us via your security incident connectors?
That's a good question. So we have, jump to that real quick. There's 3 different types. So we have our security incidents, we've got our security detections, and then the events that are associated to that. What that means is if I jump back to my incidents, let me clear my filters, or actually stop here. this incident. So if I just want incidents, which are those correlated events where we have tickets associated to those, that would be that. That would be your security incident piece. If you want detections, which are, clear these out, detections are where we detected something, however, not enough correlation to be an incident, but just something you should probably know about, this one being a C2. You can subscribe to those with the security detection and the fixed spelling. And then the last piece is really the events that were correlated to that. So when I look at this and I see there were 6 events or 8 events, those security events are now going to flow into it as well. So that could bring in the full payloads of showing you here's everything that was correlated to identify that security detection or that incident. So those are the 3 areas you get to pick from. In the example I did, I subscribed to all of those. But again, that will depend on your needs.
Okay, great. And it looks like the last one I'm seeing coming in is, when can I expect to see the new tools? Like, when would they be made available if I'm a current customer?
Yeah, so these are all currently available right now for everybody to leverage and start using. So the biggest piece of it is, let me jump to it. If you do want to start using them, being able to jump into the documentation, turning IPS on and off, the search capabilities, but they're all released and available for everybody right now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it looks like that was the last question, unless anybody else wants to submit one real fast. So at this time, we'll just wrap up the webinar. Thank you guys so much for joining. Oh, it looks like Abraham, give me 1 second. Looks like we do have a comment that had come in. Let me just make sure we get that answered. Oh, he is asking about where he can find printed materials about armor.com and resources, and just thanks you for your time. So thanks Abraham for submitting that. Like Robert said, armor.com/resources has all of these available materials about, who Armor is, our Armor Anywhere, thank you, Robert, our Armor Anywhere technical solutions brief, our data sheet, so you can kind of understand even more of those aspects of our solution in total, versus just the DevOps features. And then we also have the compliance data sheet and information. So if your company does have some compliance regulations that they need to meet, you can kind of see how our solution falls within those parameters. So definitely check out armor.com/resources. And then the other technical documentation that that Robert was showing, it can be found at docs.armor.com. So if you're a current customer, you can definitely dive into that area as Robert's showing you guys right now. So it looks like those are all the questions that we've had come in today. Thanks everyone so much for joining us. As a reminder, we would love to get your feedback in the post-webinar survey, so please leave us a few notes. And thanks again, Robert, for joining us. It was a great technical demo, and we hope to see everybody again next time.
All right, thank you.